On December 21st, 1988, Pan American World Airways Flight 103 exploded over the small Scottish town of Lockerbie, killing all 259 people aboard and 11 residents on the ground, with a total of 270 fatalities. The Lockerbie bombing became the deadliest terrorist attack in the history of the United Kingdom and remained the deadliest act of aviation terrorism until September 11, 2001. The investigation that followed would span years, cross international boundaries, and ultimately lead to one of the most controversial convictions in modern legal history: the aircraft and flight. The aircraft operating as Pan Am Flight 103 was a Boeing 747-121 registered as N739PA and named the Clipper Maid of the Seas. The aircraft was 19 years old at the time of the disaster, having been delivered to Pan American World Airways in February 1970. The 747 was configured to carry hundreds of passengers across the Atlantic, making it ideal for the busy transatlantic routes Pan Am operated. Flight 103 originated as a feeder flight from Frankfurt, Germany. The aircraft departed Frankfurt and flew to London's Heathrow Airport, where it was redesignated as Flight 103 for the transatlantic leg to New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, with a final destination of Detroit's Metropolitan Wayne County Airport. At Heathrow, the aircraft took on additional passengers and cargo. The flight crew consisted of Captain James B. Macquarie, age 55, First Officer Raymond R. Wagner, age 52, and Flight Engineer Jerry D. Everett, age 46. The cabin crew numbered 13 flight attendants, and in total, the aircraft carried 243 passengers and 16 crew members. Among the 259 passengers and crew were 190 Americans. The passenger manifest included families traveling home for Christmas, business travelers, and notably 35 students from Syracuse University who had been studying abroad through the Division of International Programs. The Syracuse students were returning home for their holidays after a semester in London and other European cities. The departure and explosion. At approximately 1825 GMT, 6:25 p.m. local time, on December 21, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 departed London's Heathrow Airport's runway 27R, bound for New York. The Boeing 747 climbed into the dark evening sky, beginning its journey across the Atlantic. Weather conditions were good, and the flight proceeded normally as it climbed to its cruising altitude. The plane had reached a height of approximately 31,000 feet and was preparing for the oceanic portion when a timer-activated bomb detonated. At 19:02 GMT, approximately 38 minutes after takeoff, Air Traffic Controller Alan Top at the Shanwick Oceanic Control noticed that Flight 103's transponder signal had vanished from his radar screen. The explosion occurred in the forward cargo hold of the aircraft. The plastic explosive that detonated in the forward cargo hold triggered a sequence of events that led to rapid destruction of the aircraft. The blast created a catastrophic structural failure, causing the aircraft to break apart almost instantaneously at 31,000 feet over the Scottish countryside. The aircraft shattered into three main sections. The forward fuselage, including the flight deck and first-class sections, separated first and fell away from the main body of the aircraft. The central section, containing the wings, fuel tanks, and engines, broke apart next. The aft fuselage section detached as the wreckage plummeted towards the ground. No distress call was ever transmitted. The destruction was so sudden and complete that the crew had no time to react. The crash on Lockerbie. The destruction of Flight 103 over Lockerbie created a scene of unimaginable devastation. Wind scattered victims and debris along an 81-mile-long corridor covering 845 square miles in area. The largest sections of wreckage fell directly on the town of Lockerbie, a quiet community of approximately 3,000 residents in the Dumfries and Galloway region of Scotland. The nose section, containing the flight deck, landed in a field on the outskirts of town. The central section, carrying most of the fuel, impacted in Sherwood Crescent area of Lockerbie. The massive fireball from the exploding fuel tanks destroyed 21 houses and created a crater 155 feet long. A large section of the aircraft crashed in a residential street in Lockerbie, killing 11 residents who were in their homes preparing for Christmas just 4 days away. The scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Bodies, luggage, aircraft parts, and personal belongings were scattered across the Scottish countryside and throughout the town. Emergency services from across Scotland converged on Lockerbie, but it quickly became apparent that there were no survivors. All 259 people on board the aircraft had perished, along with 11 innocent residents of Lockerbie. The investigation begins. Within hours of the crash, investigators from multiple agencies descended on Lockerbie. The Lockerbie bombing became the subject of Britain's largest criminal inquiry, led by its smallest police force, the Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary. The investigation was immediately joined by specialists from the UK's Air Accidents Investigation Branch (AAIB), the US Federal Bureau of Investigation (the FBI), and numerous other law enforcement and intelligence agencies. The explosion at 30,000 feet rained debris over 845 square miles, creating the largest ever crime scene. More than 5,000 responders, including investigators from the FBI and Scottish authorities, combed the countryside for clues. They recovered over 319 tons of wreckage and thousands of pieces of evidence. The investigation faced extraordinary challenges. The debris field covered hundreds of square miles of farmlands, forests, and residential areas. Every piece of wreckage, every fragment of luggage, every personal belonging had to be photographed, catalogued, and examined. Investigators conducted fingertip searches across vast areas, looking for any clue that might explain what had happened. Within days, forensic examination revealed crucial evidence. Pieces of the forward cargo hold showed distinctive signs of an explosion: metal torn outwards, scorching patterns, and chemical residue. The investigation quickly transitioned from an accident inquiry to a criminal investigation for mass murder. The bomb. Forensic specialists painstakingly reconstructed sections of the aircraft's cargo hold. They discovered that a luggage container designated AV4041, located in the forward cargo hold beneath the first-class cabin, showed extensive blast damage. The container had been positioned on the left side of the aircraft near the fuselage's skin. The bomb, constructed with the odorless plastic explosive Semtex, was hidden in a cassette player that was stored in a suitcase. Specifically, investigators recovered fragments indicating the device had been concealed inside a Toshiba RT-SF16 bomb beat radio cassette player. The explosive used was Semtex-H, a plastic explosive manufactured in Czechoslovakia and known to be supplied to Libya and various terrorist organizations. The bomb employed a sophisticated timer mechanism. Unlike simpler barometric triggers that activate at certain altitudes, this device used an electronic timer that could be set to detonate at a specific time after activation. This allowed the bombers to ensure that the explosion would occur when the aircraft was over the Atlantic Ocean, far from land, and beyond immediate rescue capabilities. Investigators determined that the bomb contained approximately 12 to 16 ounces of Semtex, a relatively small amount that, when detonated inside a pressurized aircraft at altitude, was sufficient to cause catastrophic structural failure. The explosion punched a hole approximately 20 inches in diameter through the fuselage's skin, causing rapid decompression that tore the aircraft apart within seconds. Tracing the suitcase. One of the most critical aspects of the investigation involved tracing how the bomb-laden suitcase reached Flight 103. Fragments of a Samsonite suitcase recovered from the wreckage showed blast damage consistent with having contained the explosive device. Inside the suitcase, investigators found remnants of clothing that would prove crucial to the investigation. Among the clothing fragments were items identified as being manufactured in Malta and sold exclusively through shops on the Mediterranean island. One piece, a fragment cloth from a pair of trousers, was traced to a specific manufacturer. This led investigators to Malta and to a shopkeeper named Tony Gauci, who operated a clothing store called Mary's House in the town of Slimia. Gauci recalled selling an assortment of clothing to a man in the shop either on November 23rd or December 7th, 1988. The man had purchased various items in an unusual manner. buying without much regard for the sizes or style, behavior that Gauchi found memorable. Years later, Gauchi would identify the Libyan intelligence officer Abdel Basset El Magari as resembling the man who made the purchase through his identification, though his identification would become controversial. Investigators also traced the suitcase journey through the baggage system. Records from Frankfurt Airport show that an unaccompanied bag from Air Malta flight KM-180 had been transferred to a feeder flight and then to Pan Am Flight 103 at Heathrow. However, no passenger from the Air Malta flight had checked luggage through to Flight 103, and no passenger had transferred from that flight to Pan Am 103, indicating that the suitcase was unaccompanied, a critical security breach. Perhaps the most important piece of physical evidence recovered was a tiny fragment of a circuit board found embedded in a piece of scorched shirt fabric. In 1989, months after the plane's crash and the end of the formal recovery effort, a piece of scorched shirt was found. The piece contained a fragment of circuit board that the heat of the explosion had fused into the shirt's polyester fabric. The circuit board's fragment, measuring only a few millimeters across, was examined by an electronics expert in both the UK and the United States. Further analysis confirmed that the fragment exactly matched part of a timer circuit manufactured specifically for the Libyans. The timer was identified as an MST-13 model manufactured by a Swiss company called Mebo, operated by Edwin Bollier. Investigators learned that Mebo had manufactured a limited number of these specialized timers exclusively for Libyan intelligence agencies. The MST-13 timer was sophisticated and reliable, capable of being programmed to detonate a device hours or even days after activation. This evidence provided a direct link between the bombing and Libya. The timer fragment became central to the case against Libya. However, it would also become one of the most controversial pieces of evidence, with defense attorneys and independent analysts later raising questions about the chain of custody and the reliability of its identification. The suspects. Following a 3-year joint investigation by Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary and the US Federal Bureau of Investigation, arrest warrants were issued for 2 Libyan nationals in 1991. The suspects were identified as Abdel Basset Ali Mohammed Al-Maghari and Lamin Khalifa Fima, both officers in the Libyan intelligence group. Al-Maghari was the head of security in Libyan Arab Airlines and allegedly worked for Libyan intelligence. Fima had been the station manager for Libyan Arab Airlines at Malta's Lacroix Airport. Evidence suggested that the two men had used their positions with the airline to facilitate the bomb's placement onto the baggage system at Malta, where it traveled unaccompanied through Frankfurt to London and ultimately onto Flight 103. The investigation suggested that Libya had ordered the attack in retaliation for the 1986 US bombing of Tripoli and Benghazi, ordered by President Ronald Reagan in response to Libyan-sponsored terrorism. The US airstrikes had killed approximately 40 people, including Muammar Gaddafi's adopted daughter, and the Libyan leader had vowed revenge. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi refused to extradite the two suspects. This led to a protracted diplomatic standoff. In 1992, the United States Security Council imposed sanctions on Libya, including an air travel embargo and arms sale prohibition, demanding that Libya surrender the suspects for trial. The standoff lasted for years. Libya maintained that its nationals should be tried in Libya or in a neutral country, not in the United States or United Kingdom. Eventually, in 1998, a compromise was reached. The suspects would be tried under Scottish law, but in a neutral location, the Netherlands. A special Scottish court was established at Camp Zeist, a former US Air Force base in the Netherlands. The trial began on May 3, 2000, more than 11 years after the bombing. The proceedings were conducted without a jury, with 3 Scottish judges presiding. The trial lasted over 9 months and heard testimony from 230 witnesses, examined 3 million words of evidence across 10,000 pages, and reviewed thousands of pieces of physical evidence. On January 31, 2001, the court delivered its verdict. Fima was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. and Al-Maghri was convicted of 270 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years. He was transferred to Greenock Prison in Scotland to serve his sentence. The conviction of Al-Maghri was controversial from the outset. Defense attorneys and independent observers raised numerous concerns about the evidence and the conduct of the investigation. The identification by shopkeeper Tony Gawichi was questioned, as he had initially been uncertain, had seen photos of Al-Maghri in magazines before making his identification. There were also allegations that Gawichi had received substantial payments from US authorities for his cooperation. The time fragment evidence was also disputed. Some critics argued that the chain of custody was unclear and that the fragment could have been planted. Questions were raised about why such a crucial piece of evidence was not discovered until months after the initial investigation, and why it was found in an area that had already been extensively searched. In 2009, Al-Maghri was diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer. On compassionate grounds, Scottish Justice Secretary Kenny MacAskill authorized his release, allowing him to return to Libya. The decision sparked international outrage, particularly from the families of American victims and US officials. Al-Maghri returned to a hero's welcome in Libya and died in 2012, maintaining his innocence to the end. In 2003, Libya formally accepted responsibility for the bombing and agreed to pay compensation to the victim's family, $2.7 billion in total, or roughly $10 million per victim. However, Libya never admitted to ordering the attack. The investigations continued even after Al-Maghri's conviction. In December 2020, US authorities announced charges against Abu Aguila Mohammed Masood, described as a bombmaker for Libyan intelligence. The criminal complaint alleged that from approximately 1973 to 2011, Masood worked for the external security organization, the Libyan Intelligence Service, in various capacities, including as a technical expert in building explosive devices. According to the complaint, Masood was directed by Libyan intelligence to travel to Malta with a prepared suitcase bomb. He allegedly met with Al-Maghri and Fima, set the timer on the device, and handed the suitcase to Fima at the airport for placement onto the baggage system. In November 2022, Masood was arrested and transferred to US custody to face trial. His case remains ongoing. Impact and legacy. The Lockerbie bombing fundamentally changed aviation security worldwide. In the immediate aftermath, airports and airlines implemented significantly enhanced security measures for baggage screening. The concept of passenger baggage reconciliation became standard practice, ensuring that the checked baggage only travels when the passenger who checked it is on board the aircraft. Screening technologies improved dramatically. Explosive detection systems using various technologies, including X-ray, CT scanning, and chemical trace detection, became mandatory at airports globally. Security protocols for transferring baggage between flights were tightened to prevent unaccompanied bags from reaching aircraft. The investigation also highlighted the importance of international cooperation in counterterrorism efforts. The joint investigation involving US, UK, and other international agencies established precedents for information sharing and coordinated responses to terrorist attacks. The willingness to conduct a trial under Scottish law in a neutral country demonstrated the international community's commitment to pursuing justice through legal means. The impact on the community of Lockerbie was profound and lasting. The residents of this small Scottish town responded to the tragedy with extraordinary compassion. They opened their homes to investigators and victims' families, provided food and comfort, and helped care for the personal effects for those who died. The bonds formed between Lockerbie residents and the victims' families continued decades later. Multiple memorials honor the victims of Flight 103. In Lockerbie, a memorial garden at Dyfrsdale Cemetery contains the name of all 270 victims. In the United States, a memorial cairn constructed from 270 blocks of Scottish sandstone, one for each victim, was dedicated at Arlington National Cemetery in 1995. Syracuse University holds an annual Remembrance Week every December and awards scholarships in honor of the 35 students who died. Every December 21st, memorial services are held in Lockerbie, Syracuse, Arlington, and other locations. At Syracuse University, a ceremony is conducted at precisely 14:03 EST, which is exactly 1903 GMT time, which is the exact moment the bomb detonated. The names of the 35 Syracuse students are read aloud, ensuring that they are never forgotten. Conclusion. Pan Am Flight 103 represents one of the darkest chapters in aviation history, a calculated act of terrorism that killed 270 innocent people and devastated communities on both sides of the Atlantic. The bombing demonstrated the vulnerability of commercial aviation to terrorist attacks and the catastrophic consequences when baggage security fails. The investigation into Flight 103 was remarkable for its scope, duration, and international cooperation. Investigators from multiple countries worked together for years, examining millions of pieces of evidence, interviewing thousands of witnesses, and ultimately building a case that led to trial and conviction. Yet questions and controversies persist, with some believing that the full truth about who ordered and executed the attack has never been revealed. The lessons learned from Lockerbie had made aviation significantly safer. Enhanced baggage screening, passenger baggage reconciliation, improved explosive detection technology, and better international intelligence sharing all emerged from this tragedy. While these measures cannot bring back the 270 lives lost, they have prevented countless other potential attacks. On every anniversary, as darkness falls over the Scottish countryside and memorial candles are lit in Lockerbie's Garden of Remembrance, the world is reminded of the 270 people whose journey ended in an instant over a small Scottish town. Their memory demands continued vigilance against terrorism and unwavering commitment to aviation security, ensuring that what happened on December 21st, 1988 never happens again. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you want to see more videos just like this, be sure to subscribe and like this video. I also have a Patreon where I upload these videos early, and also there'll be exclusive content in the future, so be sure to check that out. But thank you all so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video.